Significant figures. What I'm going to go over in this video is how to determine when a number is significant. There are 4 rules for determining whether a number is significant. The first rule, rule number 1, states that a number 1 through 9 is always significant when it's recorded. The other 3 rules pertain to zeros. There are 3 types of zeros. Rule number 2 talks about leading zeros. Leading zeros are never counted. Rule number 3 talks about a trap zero. Trap zeros are always counted. And rule number 4 talks about trailing zeros. These are sometimes counted. It depends if the decimal is present. So let's look at the 4 rules and apply them to some numbers I have. The first number example we're going to do is this one, 0.001020. This will actually allow us to go through all 4 rules and see how they apply to an actual number. So I suggest when you go through the rules that you always start with rule number 1, apply that rule first, and then move on to rule number 2. So rule number 1 says if I look at this number, I read it left to right, and I'm going to find any 1 through 9 number. Those 1 through 9 numbers with this number that's been recorded is going to always be significant. So I'm finding those numbers. So there's the 1 through 9, and there's a 1 through 9. What you see I have left are zeros. I actually have all 3 types of zeros based on my rules, but let's go through each rule at a time. So rule number 2 talks about leading zeros. If I read this number left to right, you'll notice that there's zeros that come in front of that first 1 through 9 number. Those are your leading zeros. Now, leading zeros are never counted as far as being significant or measured, but they are important because they hold a number place. It's the difference from 0.001 to say 0.01 or 0.1. So in the terms of significant figures, they are not counted though, so I draw a line through those. I'm not going to count them as to my total number of significant figures because again, they are leading zeros. Rule number 2 talks about trapped zeros. Notice I have a 1 through 9 number here and a 1 through 9 number there. In between, there's a 0. We're going to consider that a trapped 0 because it's stuck between 2 things we count. We can't skip over that. We always count a trapped 0. We then move on. There's 1 more 0 left. That's at the end of a number. That's what we're going to call the trailing zeros. With a trailing 0, they are sometimes counted. It depends if there's a decimal present. So if I look through this number left to right, I see I do have a decimal present here. That's going to make that 0 count. So the way this number was written, it's going to have 4 significant figures. Let's go on to another example. We have the number 300. Rule number 1 says I again look for the 1 through 9 number. Those are always significant. So here if I read left to right, I see a 1 through 9 number. I then go to rule number 2, which talks about leading zeros. Are there any zeros in front? I don't see any, so I don't have to worry about those. I don't actually have leading zeros in this number, so I move on to rule number 3. That would talk about trap zeros. Well, I don't have more than 1 through 9, so I can't have any trap zeros. That means the only zeros that I have left here, these 2 are going to fall into the rule number 4 category, a trailing 0. They are sometimes counted. It depends if the decimal is present. I do not see a decimal present, so these would not count, meaning again they're not measured. The way this number is written, 300 without a decimal, only has 1 significant figure. Let's look at the number 450. This number again, apply the rules, start with rule number 1 and work your way through. So rule number 1 talks about 1 through 9 numbers. I find all of those first. I read left to right. 4 is a 1 through 9 number. 5 is a 1 through 9 number. I then see I have a 0 left. We apply the rules. Rule number 2 says leading 0. There's no zeros in front, so I move on to rule number 3, which is a trap 0. There's no zeros in between, so it must be rule number 4. A trailing 0, that 0 is at the end. What it depends if there's a decimal, so if I read left to right, I do see there's a decimal. That means this 0 does count. This number, the way it's written, would have 3 significant figures. Let's look at another number, 2020. For this, again, we apply the rules in order. Rule number 1 is 1 through 9, which I have. Another 1 through 9, which I have. Rule number 2 deals with leading. There's no zeros out front. Rule number 3 deals with trapped. We do have a trapped 0 because it's stuck between two numbers that count. And then rule 4 is a trailing. This is a trailing 0. I look left to right. I don't see any decimal. That trailing 0 does not count. That means it has 3 significant figures the way that number is written. And then our last one, 6.0023. For this, again, we apply the rules 1 through 4. Start with rule number 1. So 1 through 9, 1 through 9, and 1 through 9. Rule number 2 deals with leading. I do not have any leading zeros. Rule number 3 deals with traps. So notice I have a 1 through 9 here and a 1 through 9 there. It doesn't matter there's a decimal here. These zeros are still between numbers we count. We have to count those zeros. And then we don't have any more zeros to worry about, so we don't worry about rule number 4. We just go back and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 significant figures. Okay, so hopefully that helps in explaining the 4 rules. I'll make another video that deals with following significant figures through calculations.